My genitals hurt from being squished, and no matter how much I shifted, they refused to feel better. It's like they're just being in a seated position was pinching my urethra. Something about my pants, maybe? They needed to hang in order to feel right, otherwise the mass would just bunch together. I feel like she fed off this discomfort, like she somehow could follow the directional attention of my face and body to my pelvis, and since I kept my legs open to try and keep the pain down, a sexual reaction would be initiated in her, and since I was in a weakened state, the sexuality would be predated. She now held the upper hand, and in nature and interaction, they took the physical power they would get through sexual conquest of their partners. Content enough, it made her happy. In all practicality, I could easily kill her whenever I wanted, so why bother with the predatory nature? It made her behave otherwise. The control of it and the empowerment of her sexual nature made her feel safe, so I became complacent. Besides this way, her strategy to build tension poked me until it boiled over feminine sexuality, the most effective way to drive power. These were opinions, though, and I'm not sure they would work if she wasn't my partner. Either way, my legs were closed now because her glances were actually hungry and I didn't want her to eat it. She was already digesting herself, so why not the most delicious part of someone else? She wasn't actually there, so let it slide, but closing my legs just made it worse. I tried putting up a fight first, looking at her thighs in her high-cut shorts, but while driving she kept keyed up and wired and was in my weak and foggy state of head trauma and laziness. For her it was situated tension, which built a pressure released as sexual passion. Directed towards me under a given condition, I let it happen. As sort of it got me off watching her squirm. I deep dive into the guttural daydream, a bit overly personal. I thought back to myself as we drove along. The desert changes, mood, openness created a more personal environment. Now at night we stopped a few times to look up the stars, which is nice. They were more vibrant and you could see the entire picture from the under cover of the trees. They seemed closer to the stars, while the clouds would be further away the next day. The night would be closer while the day farther away. I preferred distance, so it was my time to shine in the daytime while being in the desert. The sky would give me space I greatly desired, and the open terrain would give me freedom to romp. I slept some the first night and didn't dream at all. It was liberating, like being free of life and death. The holes in my head had comfortable scabs by the morning. Things were oddly clean, so I avoided infection, at least as far as I could tell so far. I somewhat obsessively looked at them in the sun visor mirror, 3 holes in a line going up the right side of my head. I took the bandages off the night before. The wounds were damp from the trapped moisture. In the desert, I knew the damage was less likely to become infected because the air was dry and clean, less moisture to promote microbial growth. Although it was considerably hotter in the day, for that reason I took off the bandages when going to bed. Not planned, they were bothering me and I knew the cool, dry air would be good for them. I generally followed my body when making medical decisions. For example, if a doctor told me I needed to leave the bandages on for a week, if the wounds were feeling unusual or uncomfortable, I would probably take them off anyways, as my body was telling me that something was going wrong. A mixture between instinct and common sense is how I made my medical decisions, because in the same logic, if I had stitches bothering me, I wouldn't remove them unless being sure the wound wouldn't reopen, especially since life constantly needed my attention. Having bothersome things keeping my attention could potentially become unsafe if I continue to exist extensively distracted. What I mean is that I can mess up while doing something, being distracted by discomfort. And exactly, I did this frequently. Readjusting myself, I would often lose some sort of functionality. Somewhat like when driving. I just needed to take all my clothes off and run free. Or just buy looser clothing like robes. Become a real desert boy. I wasn't getting really into the desert identity at this point. My clothing were workers' clothing, so they weren't meant for sitting. I needed to become a part of the cult which broke the bottle over my head to gain access to their cool clothing, the silk robes. For a while, I questioned how they could even find so many robes. They were tattered, so maybe they made them themselves. They were all dyed blue. That must have been their decided favorite color. They probably had a favorite color voting session to decide as a collective. Whatever color was the most collectively favored, it was what they picked. Of course it was blue, the most common favorite color, calming and cooling. It didn't exactly match the style the cult admitted. It acted more like a red cult instead. No, a purple cult. Maybe it would be too expensive to have mixed red and blue dye, so they cut corners and settled on blue. These were the thoughts I used to kill time. I frequently watched her and continued switching gears for her. Her arm was now badly bruised. The hit may have even damaged bone. I felt really awful, but the damage was done. I even more of her bidding now. I was taking care of her every need as she drove. Although she was now sleep deprived, and now the driver being in similar conditions, the caravan was now one, a beautiful entity of moving vehicles, a unit. They were zombie drivers, their souls chopped in twine, the life energy from their lower body dropping below the base of the car, and the axles and wheels while their upper halves in the roof and shed structure of the vehicle, with the wheels and pedals as their brain and the motor as their beating heart, the gas tank as their digestive tract, coolant in their blood, oil their phlegm, and mucus. The whole ordeal was really off-putting to be around. They were in constant discomfort. I could read it on their face. Cars didn't have nerves, but they could have headlights, so she could illuminate the discomfort from her face. Now that they were their cars, they could interact like a band of travelers along walking. Only a disastrous version. A disgusting malformation of a pack of humans interacting through industrial machines. Driving was really meant for an individual thing unless you had something to drive to like music, but that wasn't available for us. As a group of travelers, you really need something to set the mood, but alas, we had no such thing. I eventually asked her what she was thinking about, and her eyes moved to me for a second. She seemed to be driving through torture, with a look in her eye. She didn't respond, and turned back to the road, continuing to focus driving. She was determined that this far into the fray, she wasn't going to lose focus. I was spoiled at this point, in her mobile bird's nest, clutter all around me, my body sprawling in different angles, multiple food bags open all around me, crumbs on my bloated stomach shift off and around my head. A real sight to behold, the desert sun beating down, rock formations in the distance. Occasionally we drove near them and got to awe in their marvel. They were a distinct part of the landscape, everywhere but always at a distance. We were heading into a grassland low. A body of water was nearby. The sand here was gray and sad, but with the puddles and orange grasses, the mood was beautifully melancholic and calm, like an underworld I could get used to. This section of territory could be considered a lowland desert marsh. Satan questioned my methods as I decided to give her roadhead. I needed to get some demons out of her gateway to hell. With sky gray and yellow, I dove in. My eyes closed and I made work. She immediately loosened up. My mind escaped me into the act. I listened to the voices in my head attack my way of life, discouraging me from moving forward. My vision danced in the dark behind my eyelid. Shape moved like bodies of water. Whales in depths of the ocean dancing and playing as she let out moans which escalated into banshee wails. I opened my eyes briefly and saw her stomach as the infinite of space. A black pit with stars at the spots of her skin and a single morning moon was her belly button. Half full of the shape was a half circle, mark of a successful birth. The few moments of brief, pure spirituality I could feel in my life, on the road moving away from the problems fast enough so they couldn't bind me, I could let go with the demons at my side, giving me a break before jumping back inside. Things wrapped up quickly. I probably should have done something similar earlier, but the mood wasn't right and she didn't ask. Either way, for the rest of the trip, I would just use my hand. When I wasn't working the stiff shift, I'd be playing her like a flute, my hand working light enough to make the coils last. I didn't want to make the mistake of wearing down the pieces before the journey's end. I paced myself so I wouldn't damage her epidermal flesh. Chafing could be considered one of the most slow-burning forms of torture I was familiar with. Night found us. I eventually entered the same trance state of discomfort as her from sitting for most of the last 2 days. I passed time almost completely missing. I was lost somewhere in outer space. My move from continuous contact, I was her fetus now, afloat in the amniotic fluid of the car, her body now encompassed as we drove along in the cold desert night. I didn't sleep much through the night and instead broke free from her bubble and directed my body language away from her out the window. I stared at my reflection in the dark mirror and saw nothing. My arm was denying me my face and my own. Something else was expressing through my eyes, or maybe nothing at all. In the near complete dark of the only headlights, illuminated the road ahead by some 30 feet, spawned the light from the spearing behind us. Some ancient sea monster was following us behind some 100 yards, its bioluminescent lights trying to persuade us to turn around, but we were attracted to the red light ahead of another 100. A mysterious dark shade fluorescing a calm passion under all of the pressure from being on the seabed. There's always bigger fish as we chased pursued. We were tailed by the fish behind us, so on and so forth, all being guided by a mass, existing at the bottom of the ocean, entombed in the road engine, leading the truck through the valleys of the cold and isolated night. We found our way into the port, the only sign of civilization between huge swaths of desert and ocean. An open sandscape with dunes blocking endless terrain, with desert cacti and shrubs hiding a ways offshore behind the coastal piles of sand. Some small barkless trees hid around the streets, hiding a town around of small connected buildings with hidden purposes behind closed doors. I skipped a glance to my girlfriend, the girl driving, to catch her feelings of finally finding civilization. She seemed curious and observed how the change of scenery took place between the sprawl and inland desert and coastal dunes, how the buildings popped up and took root on their cinder block foundations, catching people walking around among us as our caravan avoided them as we drove by on the city streets while I walked upon the sidewalk. With small populations of 4 to 5 visible people at any given location and time while moving, drawing curiosity from people busy with their lives and their community as multiple transport caravans carried through. The third day, I sat isolated in my car seat, wondered what she was thinking while driving. Her face read something along the lines of, "My ass is stiff from the driving all day and it hurts when I get out." She moved some, changing facial expressions, communicating. Then I will have to get out of the seat and unload with a tired ass. Another change of expression. Why did I have to leave the comfort of that farm for this tiring lifestyle? Her opinion couldn't form before getting out of the car. Building upon her previous thought, she would think, "My butt is stiff from the drive, but it was fun to do." I was being more reasonable with myself. She seemed happy. I made sure as she continued to progress in thought. Life was a constant movement for me, but for some reason I was constantly getting somewhere else. A moment passed. I couldn't read her face now. She was questioning things. Her eyes refocused on the road and she conjured her feelings. I always felt the same, but the scenery or work was always different. A pause here. She took a deep breath. I felt more free from the hassle of constant company, away from him, but now I'm glad to be alongside him. Her face hum shifted as the car bounced, focusing intensely on her face and her head reading her thoughts. It expressed. The constant hum dinging of the car along the old roads, side coated by sands of the desert, drove me insane. Lucky he left me satisfied with quick work of his tongue, and hand helped me block out the constant bouncing of a moving car. This was nice. Glancing over at her, she was encouraging, introspective, and derailed from having to reassure her boy. At least 3 days of driving was bothersome enough, but having to help unload additionally was exhausting. I preferred the sedentary life of farm work, staying in one spot as my own as I pleased. Part 2. Rule Bajoning. A split entwined between two individuals, boringly cute. The two suffice to saying. Two names bearing, each one in their win. One rule, we might as well describe as a distant voice, lost from inside out one's own head, torn out the back of your high-flying wired brain, as the other, Bajoning, almost acting as a drive. See, Bajoning is to sit there in proportionalism, prosperity, preposterous, knowing all there is to know about creativity as a subject, but without guidance as to act. And rule is but by its leadership hidden in itself. To control others is the rule Bajon, only based on the aspects of the three. Bajoning is to act out or off, as in bad, when listening to the prices of vice of rule. But in fact, it's to try to ignore the presentation of him, since Bajoning is girling sophistication, ejecting rule to all else. The only remaining option is to tie bewildering, phony dicing through a riff-raffing. Here, wonderstruck, all else fails in the presence of them together in parallel plane. But yes, they are both actions and reactions to something. I insist, rule Bajoning. Conjoins nada only lasts forever and can consist and can mildly coexist, bothering the sacred third. You, my friend, must be this. A tag-along to their shared wordings, existing as this. Pray away the negativity when combining equal supplies, since rule Bajoning in the presence of the italics is just as much a winning streak, but this as much as an acting together, conjoining friendship, dealing negativism, naturalism. Like a vagina and a spitting head to contort together to explain itself grandering. A talking box and a woman. Rule Bajoning. Chapter 5. Paradise Lost and Found. Impassioned with emphasis, we arrived in port, tasked with unpacking the car. Her face seemed upset now. I needed him at some level, but honestly I could have ignored this job and been fine working on the farm for the remainder of my life. We were young and I understood that he needed an escape as young men do. My eyes trained her as we continued to unpack, refocusing on working body language. The port city was missing something. Pushing to the very edge of the water, the desert lifestyle encroached as the ocean receded. Water periodically taking territory, revolving between being pushed back and sucked out into the ocean, following the advancing and receding tidal patterns as the surf took and lost the beach. Lying the shore, old vessels washed up with wood rotting and metal rusted. I was told some provided good space for the strange and stranded when they weren't in town. Massive freight liners toppled on their sides, hid these people who created small communities inside their hollowed undercarriages. Many thermal blankets covered the individuals huddled to survive in the freezing cold desert nights. Their clothes doubles as loose desert clothing with body heat trapping thermal material patching. Two of them helped us unload, with us speaking in strange accents. The port itself was built from one well-positioned, nearly level aircraft carrier, long enough to stick fully out into the sea. Wooden props had been set along it, up and down the sides to keep it from moving any. It still seemed risky, but we drove up the ramp to the deck of the aircraft carrier, parking alongside the others to help unload. Now nearly done with unpacking our SUV, we settled on helping remove valuables from a different vehicle. Bert seemed to be struggling, so we decided to help him, while Sasha, Mary, and Sue cleaned out the interiors of their trunks and beds of all luggage. After finishing unpacking, we all towed the vehicles over to the scrapyard to be dropped off. Then together we'll be figuring out what's next and how we will be getting home. He reminded us of a task while we unloaded the furniture with him. Personally, I wanted to stay in town a while to discover any tourist sites the place offered. Curious if anything stuck out in the port city was small and seemed dusty and desolate. People lived together in a community, but none today desired to leave their shops, avoiding any walking down and up the streets. Even quieter in the woods, it lacked the magical aspects, replaced by feelings of incredible openness. I wanted to explore the shore and washed up fishing boats. In the distance, docks and ragged cliff edges supported the city structure. Locals lived in the businesses and homes built upon them. To getting to know the people, I wanted to hear stories of the sea while exploring the docks was a dream of mine. The dark water tails, supermassive beasts only capable of existing in the water due to their physical makeup of the liquid suspending them. Gelatinous beings like jellyfish held afloat in the medium of salt water, lurking below. Digging into the rock is goo, hardening to appear as part of the cliff faces too, sending tendrils like an octopus arm, grabbing me while visiting the rocky shores, getting close to the edges. I thought how this could happen to anyone. Keeping me in anticipation, we first finished our unloading work, and were told by the sailors and workers to take our cars up around a large turn, the opposite direction of town in relation to where we started over the hangar. Giving us direction by pointing, we expressed our thanks and loaded into our respective vehicles. To get around the sand dune took nearly 15 minutes. Opening up around the dune was the endless sand desert with minuscule signs of abandoned civilization in the distance. At the bottom of the sand pile, stationed, a large scrapyard with smelters and crushers stationed. We dropped along the road down through the gateway of the front and parked. The people seemed nice. Trash was collected and brought in at the front of the yard, being systematically sorted through and torn apart by workers in the shacks paid to remove the metal. The pieces of trash were burned and the metal smelted into ingots. The ore stored at the back of the yard in a large storage container. Occasionally, piled along a large chain-link fence, but only in the rare overflow, compared to the city workers in dire working conditions, these men seemed gruff and trudging looking. Working in dangerous open clothing and conditions with potentially hazardous materials that could be damaged on the job, but the tasks were never deadly. 3 line workers were identified, consisting of a trash collector, collected the garbage in the baskets in the backs, and brought it to the workers in the stands, whose tools to dissect the piece of the metal. The 3rd line of workers take the baskets and remove the metal to smelt. We walked to the back of the yard after parking outside the lot, leaving the cars to be pieced. The owner of the yard greeted Bert and spoke briefly about the car's conditions, before bringing us to the back of the shop's office room for briefing and payment. We were offered more work by the company, but a brief discussion between us two of us, we decided on leaving. Exhausted, we wanted a break to relax on the beach for some days. Played splendidly, we planned to enjoy ourselves, so we rested on vacation in the port city. We assured them if we ever stopped near their offices again, or traveled close to the city, we would visit. Anytime you need something to do and need to work, you know where to find us, Bert replied. Valued over the entire port and its businesses, we're given the leader tender of the creative city as payment, enough to last us at least 7 weeks of living easy. To lead back over the mountains to the woods, whenever we please, they point us to the best places. A bus loop, leaving once a month to head back towards the city. At its final stop, the woods, before heading over a separate road back to a different section of the desert. We would take the option the next time we passed by, recommending a hotel at the center of the town that was fixed up nice with a quality service and beds we could use for a fee. They followed instructions heading south the next port after dropping us off. They were given nice station wagons to do so, 2 of them each, sitting 3 or 4 as they were closed-doors cars. We would be missing them after they said goodbyes and split off, dropping us off in the center of town. First, we visited a bar, as forest dwellers stuck in a rich coastal city which spoke in a strange dialect. They were used to foreigners from the large mountain city coming in on bus to bother them, but these ones seemed to have belonged more to the wilderness. Acknowledging the first one, a male, maybe 22 to 24, tall and handsome, wearing a fleece strip as a scarf and patchwork clothing, carrying an old mountaineer's backpack, come back with a satchel around front. The second one, 25 to 27-year-old female, with a single smaller backpack, bundled in fleece clothing, tight-fitting around her waist, of the healthy young woman with a faded branded wool coat extra large on her. They moved quickly, extra cautious, being in the new area. They needed to be clear that in this territory we were a collective, and to be rude to one of us was to be rude to all of us. They cautiously took their seats at the bar and talked to the server on what drinks were available before glancing around and deciding that a better place for them would be somewhere else. Calling, they asked the server if their most polite tone for where the most casual experience existed in a town. A lounge might be the nicest place for them, putting them down the street to a hookah bar fusion. For a minute I lost myself in the bar on the streets. I was feeling better. Closing my eyes trainless, I felt myself go into a mode of playing a role. Now and then I would lose my body and go somewhere up above to a celestial function, performing naturally under instinct in a social space or tricky outdoor situation. Now outside in the cold desert night air, everything started to make sense to me. I was destined for the nomadic lifestyle I was living, but she was not. The face I was receiving from explained it all. She wanted to be sedentary and work, and all I wanted to do was keep moving. She convinced me to give up on following Beverly Burt and the bunch to the ends of the earth, instead pushing me into returning to the farm. Her decision would now remain here until the morning sun. At least we had found the bus station and deciphered when the next trip leaves town. Until then, our task was finding the seedy lounge where we would spend the night. I looked around and felt dizzy. The holes in my head started to hurt and bleed. The wind glittering sand across my face, and in the dark I could see the infinite eyes of insanity. Physical conjugations of eyeballs as spots created by the flash burn of light stuck in my vision. I looked up into the stars to find comfort and found clarity, only enough to satisfy me for an instant as she brought my head down with her hands to watch the holes bleed. Glancing at my skull shape for only a moment, I never let anything slip. She fetched a rag from her pocket which she used for sweat to catch my blood from my face. By looking into my eyes to find the feeling, she saw that I was distracted and was caught looking at things, losing a part of myself somewhere between now and before leaving the village, most likely while undergoing the procedure. Seemingly startled, my eyes told stories. Woozy, I immediately told her the problem was in my head and I needed to see the stars, omitting the information on the endless eyes staring at me through the blocked light. In fact, I never mentioned once the immense of my own private world existing from the bottle breaking on my heads onwards. Continuously spiritual, the hallucinations experienced were my own perception of the world and never needed to leave me as their private experiences. I had my own spin on spirituality upon my involvement, and to explain it to an outside observer might take work. In the woods I was created a sense of reasoning that would function to her, but now only the eyes were everywhere in this town changed everything. I rationalized them away as the spirit of civilization, less spiritually natural and more occultic in nature, wanting to be understood as a stress conjuring in my brain's response to the social scrutinization and sudden wound opened in my head bleeding around the sky god's conjugation of 1,000 peering eyes. Either ways, this aberration was of human nature rather than beast, man's collection of spirit and personality, or maybe culture, society, or collective, glancing to him. I left my mind to venture sky high while she started in another second. This was the desert performing work on me. Something besides the amulet in the bottle, the caribou demon, or either the cultist. All of the curse granted by these original hallucinations seemed to have landed, both physically and metaphysically. The holes in my head bled as I watched the judging eyes casting me down the infinite social collective. Still concerned, she spoke briefly to me, waiting for a moment before we both jumped back into the roles we knew fondly. I remained aloof, and she comprehended that I was done with my adventuring persona, now ready to return working with her, so we did automatically, leaving me to be myself as she smiled. Together we approached a bar with an old neon lights windows. Another sign hired to read bar as the front entrance title. This was dark since the neon tubes were broken. We glanced around, getting closer to the glass door or front entrance to see blue shaded dim lights inside lining the ceiling. A blue glow casted down refracted through the refusing covers to illuminate the space as well. Every table placed around the edge of the bar, around the edge of the establishment, had an individual light bulb hanging, lighting the small spaces with yellow hue. The bar fixed by white lights by the working space needed to be more iridescent to backlight the people sitting at the bar stools. Shadows invisible, they had nothing to stare up into walking while looking down. Instead, they stared into the glasses of elixir alcohol, thankful for the warm feeling it provided. Only 3 people rested along the counter at each table empty. We entered. We found a booth along the outskirts of the place, to elope in and took our spots, resting our belongings around the table before moving our jackets off, before venturing over to the bar to discuss with the server what we might buy.
I noticed her glancing at other people resting somber with each other at the end of the day while I talked to the server. Stout and round, restless and angry looking, not wanting to talk but doing so anyways. The lines in his forehead were deep while the remainder of his face seemed completely untouched from any signs of age. I questioned him about the menu and the service they provided. He spoke in a strange accent to the other local customers, frowning, grunting something about whiskey together before dropping their guard. Accepting us into their communal understanding know exactly what we needed. They chirped and whistled in their speech, offering everything they knew was being served before stopping. Mission again, I wanted to shoot out again, yet I was stuck in, dancing in circles around me, talking nothing. She wanted to speak and I didn't listen. The server paused back and forth between the two other customers before stifling and offering us waters to start. We took the waters easy, drinking while gathering information from his face. I noticed he had a problem with my woman. Down to her tank top, a sinking feeling pushed me into thinking she wanted more covered. Only bothering me some, I remembered he was an old and his bar scantily clad women were unrecognized and the only man would be addressed. I hated him while we watched the stars absent. Now they're in my vision of reality. I needed to go outside to stargaze and all I wanted him to do was serve liquor. Instead, Avery would swindle her way to a hidden menu everyone already knew to decide on powdered drugs. I asked her what created the salty flavored beverage from the water before indulging. Drinking it down, he never answered, laced with some compound of salt most likely. It tasted strange. We thanked him. It made us feel drunk without the nasty taste of liquor burning our esophaguses. I wanted to be drunk and it suited the mood, lifting me up. The bartender's looks insulted the scabbed holes in my head and I winced, unable to remember whether they pierced my brain or if they correctly stopped before drilling gray matter. Either way, I hoped to heal soon, monitoring their progress as they did. I stopped somewhere since the mind I was given now dealt enough trauma to be fickle to a mind-altering substance. I folded and stopped drinking. I quit paying attention and allowed myself to go inwards. My everything focused on itself for some time. Everybody treated me as a compatriot as I left Earth. Myself earned the tenement ever and polishing out from the establishment. My legs hanging off the booth, planted on the floor. I fell asleep as she switched to liquor. Drinking off, I acknowledged this as an easy time off from the constant focus. Traveling was my favorite, and I was willing to lose my focus on my goals for some time. My previous lifestyle in the near-distant memory, my life of indulging in private experiences and solo adventures, was over. For a time, the subjective view of my internal workings paired with the dangerous reality of roughing it alone was gone. Reluctant to keep going when I awoke, the first day absent of everything extraordinary, now on time, dragging me around, seeking nothing in particular. The first day of our own together, we explored the town, unable to handle the pressure since everything in the desert seemed drier and bony. The people forced the city on me, nothing like the woods, were closed in my magical thinking. I might venture into any place desired alone in my thoughts. The old folk walking around me in this strange point of civilization stole all my attention, keeping me from my internal workings. The isolated subject focusing on my sanity on her was the woman guiding me. Pinned down with a loving social focus, she showed me what she was like about the city. Dominated by workers, fishermen, and the bait shops, stealing bits of personality and favor, they sold old gear described as antiques, placed together as skeletal items with paint as art. Grew out of old fashion since none was left, they tied things together in twine. String from wool or horsehair lost in time originated from something besides the coastal desert town. Calling it a city, I noticed, but only 3 large buildings. The place lasted under the shadow of strip mall structures or gas stations spotting the place. Their positions cemented, we were outcasts in a society formed as machine. No tourists welcomed as people moved around us. Any outlet of civilization, including summer established in a new biome, fueled her ecstasy. I was solemn in curiosity. Largest buildings were run down, governmental, and fancy. We only explored the outsides. 4 days of walking around in dust, salt breezy air before staying nearly stagnant in a hotel for the next 2, settling on the beach. Even if the beach in the desert sun seemed gray with old people dominating. The old people and their nonsense fried my mind. Somehow they controlled all the behavior of everyone not in the coalescence of their movement, specifically training their efforts on the working young people. Providing them with peace of mind working their youth away, I toted myself around them stiff as a button. Uncomfortable doing anything besides mirroring the people my age who combined themselves with my social position. I felt okay. She decided to fit in, falling into the comfort of the dead gray umbrella. The old people's socialite status compelled them to squirm, wholly saved by the love she contained for me. Even on the beach, the gray umbrella cast me down, shadowing me above my head at all times. I discussed with her, keeping the subject on the gray umbrella. The only response I drew was her mutual respect towards the old people. The face she created for me recoiled, squinting, scrutinizing, and scrunching like underwear. I realized something keeping about a foot lingering at the beyond forefront of my mind, the gray umbrella. The collective old people in their bodies with their sagging skins stretched and sewn together in mass covering this socializing city. Only within the city the old people's collective was acting as a blanket. The only way I behaved could be in the best interest of the old folk and their beliefs. The only holes in my head told me otherwise, stealing my mental state. All the other young people, every other young person, workers, those who owned property, overseers who chose instead to follow the old people, were my body rejecting this idea. They forcibly pushed their way through their collective social body. Somewhere in my nervous system I fought back. Their behavior made me uncomfortable and sad. Yet I sat under the umbrella while she laid out under her blue one, day in, day out, day after, on the beach, below the desert sun, watching time pass before anyone might escape this miserable nightmare. For 14 days we repeated sitting under the umbrellas and exploring the town and eating well. The highlight of this new place was eating in the city every day. Without having to subsist off of whatever was provided or consider finding our next meal, instead walking offshore to the nearest shop or restaurant to buy food, although usually only fish or seafood. If we bought a trout, an option was bring it back to the hotel room and make love before consuming. Calmly, she puppeted me using the same craft which the deer used to control my flashing on the sides of my face. Keeping my mind easy and malleable, I prevented it solely so I could run away. Instead of interacting with her, I chose to interact with the space around me, and she was tired of it. She only wanted me to stay level as we continued forwards. The only way I knew was to move together, which corresponded with the natural instinct and feeling, ignoring my problem of occasional sightseeing, noticing things that may have not been real, so we ventured home after the morning of the 15th day. It was time to plan our actions for the next big decision. She wanted an easy way out. Together we decided on returning to the woods and planned to leave on the bus. We wanted out once again to sit on the beach all day. We only first needed to find a bus stop to locate it outside the mart, a street corner instead of an actual bus stop. Venturing into this mart many times before we entered to find something to eat. The cashier, a woman amongst the faces of the men, 7 to be exact, all equally as gruff as his neck, together discussing their fishing journey before returning attention to the women. I read the kaleidoscope eyes of the cashier, and they spoke truths of working misery. My girlfriend reacted to the other woman, would be the one to give her some love. A long time since talking to another woman her age, she seemed excited. Making eye contact first, they bonded almost immediately. She might become our friend, thoughts danced in my head. Words that might save the cashier for the day. She enjoyed being a loner, and since the beginning, I was making friends for her and the both of us. Today, she was the one to reach out and talk to them beside the desk. Certainly, without loss, we would know to trust her word, insisting that she knew the bus schedule well. The bus going back to the wide city now was 2 weeks from returning to port. Until then, we would find something to do while killing time. Well informed, we 3 decided to spend time talking. The one I brought with me was closed. She needed better social setting beyond the blocking of my natural inclination to cognitively drift away to places that showed themselves to me regardless if I wanted to disregard reality or not. Nonetheless, I was proud of her ability to keep focused on someone besides myself for the moment. The worker reminded me of a homeless woman I befriended when I ran away from home. Her eyes glimmered a beautiful blue and she had dark skin, losing many teeth to silver caps acquired from the big city, far away from anywhere I wanted myself to get into for now. I noticed Ansley disappeared quickly up along the walls in an antline into a crack. She now wanted to open up to the shopkeep woman. They wanted to bond over lunch. I let them go for a girls' day entirely by themselves. The town was incredibly safe, nothing along the lines of the real desert big cities. Threatening information I acquired from the locals. 2 more weeks awaiting before leaving, I needed to find a hobby to keep myself busy for the new day. I went to a fishing docks to discuss fishing with locals. I knew fishermen were interesting. More people, they even told me where I could rent a pole. They wanted to share a bait bucket, but I needed my own equipment. So I went to the fishing shop where they gave me rentals and rented an overpriced fishing pole, renting it for the day. I returned to my comrades on the docks. My first cast was with a piece of smelly cut-up fish on the hook point, and I laughed it into surf. I waited for the bobber in the water for a short time. Not many of the local fishermen talked, and they said nothing to me when they did. Eventually, I felt a tug, and they instructed me to abruptly pull up on the hook as soon as I felt anything similar again. Only when I felt tension ensuring the hook would spike to the cheek of the fish, then I could start reeling. I tried, but this caused the tension to release. Defeated, I slowly reeled in the hook, and the small buoy with the hook came up. Empty, the bait now gone. Frustrated, I tried casting again out over the rail into the ocean. I talked while waiting, trying for at least another hour before any more action. Meanwhile, the guys around me reeled in more fish and more fish, catching them in nets. Experience helped them hook more, even though they were fishing the same waters. In reality, each only caught 4 to 5 fish daily. It seems as they caught more individually. As a collective, we dragged fish into the surface every few minutes. I tried talking to these guys sometimes. When they responded, their answers were short. Staring into the distance, digesting the undertones of their sentence replies, trying to gather more information from their words. In the hour I waited for my next nibble, I attempted to start 7 conversations and only got somewhere with one man. This man was ancient, 70 years or older, and told me once he was exactly like me, only quieter. A drifter just like me, he found his port overseas. I told him I was from over the mountains, and we bonded for a moment over our different travels with the same destination. How all journeys of different people sometimes collide to create magic. The bond was unspoken, transparent and cemented, he told me. I thought this was something entertaining. While sailing, he collected things, living that sea-legged life for years, noting the days of refreshing himself with tropical ports, with fruits and ethnic women. How working was easy compared to the women he chased, violent, gruff, and powerful, with a soft spot for quiet, sturdy men like himself, assuring me that once upon a time he might crack a mean sailor's smile, stimulating them to swoon. Now it only functions to charm itself to get him out of trouble. Slowly using it when he needed to, although his last sexual encounter was with a woman my age 25 years ago, when he was tired of love by then. Just a sorry prostitute like all the rest, he insisted. He couldn't see it progressing anywhere. No matter the circumstances, she was always pleased with him. Even at the age of final conquest, his body was still built and running well, similar to that how he felt in his 20s, looking away after saying this. Ponder with me about the amount of time he might have lasted out at sea, dying working on deck as a sailor. Alas, he was kicked off his boat even while owning it spiritually. Unfortunately, he couldn't keep pace with the young fellows and was left homeless at this port. The ship was his home, the SS Scuba Diver. He took his fishing pole and belongings to find refuge, along with his new pals fishing off the docks and selling him his catch in town. I told him my story and how I got here before watching him break down crying as an old man alone, standing tall with tears rolling down his eyes, singing about how he never found love. 10 years since he tried, I assured him that love was easy, fun like my day of fishing. Now he felt worse. Any year at this time this man was fishing boring, he would die of loneliness. I stored high hopes that his comrades would keep him alive so long as they continued to fish with him, progressing gradually into death with everyone in tandem. Now more accustomed to living alongside this man for the day, the conversation ended. I would feel the second bite of the day some minutes later. For a moment I needed to live young and free, yanking hard, snagging the fish's mouth, reeling it in with brute force as quickly as possible. I used so much vicious force and the fish had given up, going limp as soon as I started. The fish's spirit was broken. The old man assured me a trick like that would never work again. I assured him I needed to keep him moving with the energy as I reeled it in, keeping it stunned enough so it couldn't slip away. For me, this equated to what was being a young man was all about. Taking life was easy when it was just a fish, and I clobbered its face, using the railing of the dock, swinging its head down on the cold metal, holding its fin. The man wept from my indifference and cruelty before we stopped talking and resumed fishing quietly, neither angry or upset. The death of the fish only reminded him of his lonely mortality. I concurred. Eventually, the old man became tired and walked off the dock. He ventured down by the ocean, peering over a cliff face, resembling the ants previously occupying my vision. For a moment, he disappeared from my peering gaze. I watched the water before seeing him reappear, walking to the edge, pondering around the cliff face that cut from the shore into the water. I looked away, a young spirit. He had taken his fishing pole and bait bucket in hand, his fish bin in the other along with him. I watched him cast off the cliff. Reeling in anything fished from that angled steepness to the ocean would be nearly impossible, we both knew. I had bright spirits that he might last many more years so long as he continued to do outlasting things that cast off cliffs. The best plan to keep his spirits up and moving through his golden years. The consumed caribou corpse, representing the devil, appeared below me. I could see his reflection peering over the balcony of the black water below, standing next to me his pretty goat head. In the reflection and simultaneously coming out of the water is a living image, not exactly what I thought it might be. A clear image had worked its magic for only an instant, no more than a mere image to the spirit realm flashed in my vision. I listened to him ask why I wanted to jump over, and actually I never asked this and it felt teased. I assumed really that was the devil, not just a demon, morphing into some creature at a set. With a flash beside me in the reflection and a sentence from underneath the dock, he and or it was gone. The devil did not cease making contact from the ocean below. I walked off the dock, without doubt originating from the black lights casting shadows beneath the cracks of the spaces along the boards, trapped by the fishing bodies of the men. Many different things could find me from the shaded spots, and I wondered if they wanted to communicate with me. From the hiding spots of the world where they resided was beyond my comprehension, and I had no desire to visit anyways. Wandering by a mural created from a painted face screaming and entombed in a wall, troubled and large, encompassing much of the cement surface. And like a flash, I passed the alley and turned back to closer inspect the mural. It was a face expressing in the wall, with uncomfortable lead-based paint covering and infesting his pores, damaging his earth-based concrete skin. I listened to his screams in my head, trapped in the tunnel of noise created by the opening of the alley. As I walked down to get a closer inspection, I felt bad. He was brought into the existence by the personality of the winding lines and motions which created him. Art created with paint, I thought graffiti could fix his issue, covering the discomfort with a nice design, leaving him pretty enough to keep his associated from discomfort. The filling paint which coated entered every crack and tiny divot of the face of the wall. With so much agitation on his face, he expressed the ugliness with furious speech. Knowing I could end his pain, ventured down the alley and find a stairwell to his vagina, opening up by squeezing in between the doors which created his vulva. At least I needed to keep running and return to the hotel room, leaving throughout the exploring the inner workings of her gorgeous body. The sweltering innards could contain so much heat, held in by the basement doors leading to the gorgeous underground restaurant Kitchenery, where they would be slow roasting a wild desert hog from the city. For 3 days it had been transported alive, experienced the time of its life, so I believe, feeling nothing but joy in the wind of the road. Now it remained in the heartbeat that kept the kitchen alive, encouraging those sweaty boys, both kitchen workers and cooks, to move. Originally letting themselves in through the front entrance or maybe the back, either way finding their workstation deep inside their inner world. Stimulated all day and all night by their bustling and hustling, you heard the soul in her shouts, not the viciousness in her voice. The volume was the soul that kept me alive as I maneuvered home. Venturing home after returning to my fishing pole, I brought running water up the cooking pipes to the hotel to take a bath. I stepped into the hot water and laid back into the tub, feeling everything drift into hot water. Sitting there for some time, I let my eyes remain open for a while before closing them tight for the moment. Confronting me with discomfort, my body was now hypersensitive, switching and relying without the sense of sight to only sense the touch, now without any light in my vision, with a closed eyelid shroud. In the darkness behind my eyes and the back of my head, all I wanted was warmth as I washed myself off. Disappointed never finding the spot of comfort, of feeling, the entirety of warmth overtaking my body since the water never ran out, or anything other besides my cupped hands and arms as the tub filled, gathering in my folds of the creases created by the woven hands filling up my palms. The fingers together, they created a vessel of warmth I could drench over my face to wash. I relaxed from the dark expanse of how my eyes started to shift, giving me a show of delights and emotions. Provided my inner world, I drifted into a silent thought alone in my head of nothing worth noting, paying half attention to the black expanse while my thoughts refused to focus. A large portion of my conscious brain left to nothing but the black expanse of nothing. Satisfied, I refused to think anything verbal or visual, leaving the remains of my mind to unconscious personality and emotion. The only thing I wanted to think about was my feeling of my body suspended in the liquid medium and the time spent drifting alone with my personality. With my eyes closed, I waited, spending time in a state of blissful nothing. Something was wrong. I felt useless and tired. Wanting to do something new, I stood only sat in the water for now, feeling nice without any purpose or belonging to anyone besides my time spent. Indifferent, the only person to notice was my girlfriend after she returned home for a day spent with the store clerk. I found an old towel from the chest in the corner of the restroom and draped it around myself, moving around her, finding a spot on the bed. I wanted to talk to her after my bath. I felt uncomfortable with the lifestyle I was now living. After the last 3 years of my life, I now felt myself becoming older, past the age of constant regeneration after every single misfortune. The human mind is influenced by my need to continuously move, deceiving me in my own high movement to ignore my continuous breakdown of tissue. Even the bath water was unable to fix me completely. I felt the damage overtake my life and new feeling. She asked me what was wrong, and I confessed there was still something wrong with my head. For some time I was seeing things, and they talked to me in strange ways. Since we stopped moving all the time, it's like my mind is time to catch up with me. No, you're just going crazy. I knew I was out of touch with you. We were now fighting, blurting things back and forth. I spoke and I swore. You have no idea the things I've been greeting me from somewhere besides life. She grasped. She cursed. No, there's something wrong with your head. No, I talked back and continued. I've been cursed before, but since that idiot smashed the bottle in my head, I haven't been able to function with all these demons. She paused and looked at me open, unable to understand what it might be like. Using eyes of dismay, she became exhausted and talked with the same expression. Like what? Holding my breath, I let go. Smart, she turned away, refusing to press any further. I was looking around and she acknowledged I was done talking. Later she might try to get me to open up further by expressing my problems. I wanted to cry, but instead found the bed to rest upon. Flat on my back and looked up to the ceiling. After some time of staring at me, she lay down beside me. Chapter 6. Enact Chance Gamification. Before making love, I daydreamed circles of light on the ceiling beaming upon me, casting me as the spotlight of my own problems. Misplaced by some process of my inner eye, I let them ring over me as halos light, airs in my vision. Strange as other lights changed shape depending on the place it landed on the ceiling or far wall to the bed. Time passed in me studying the circles before I flipped over upon her. Neither hesitant to interact with her body, she was waiting for me. Some days since our last session of intercourse, I felt ready. I positioned myself on her for a moment, removing the suction from our faces, simultaneously removing my pants, using my arms, pulling them down with a thrust. She unbuttoned her one button on her khaki pants and unzipped her fly to shimmy her pants down only slightly. I finished the work only pulling them down an inch more. I extracted my piece and threaded the needle, pressing down our elastic of her panties with my heart on, and using my hips I thrust it up into her. I pulled her pants and nutted her down some more as we gyrated. I needed more space for my body to get deeper. Eventually she managed to remove both our pants completely off, the clothes removed stubbly with purpose. Everything, our pants, our shirts, our underwear, and even our socks out the points of our toes. We moved slowly, creating tension within ourselves, keeping it lasting as long as possible. Using my mouth parts ending her reign of terror against the tension, cutting me short, doing the same before getting back on her to end mine. Like a baby, she suckled calmly and evenly, with her swishing pattern until everything was gone, drained away entirely. We rolled in each other's arms till the dead of night, splitting apart somewhere in the moment of interaction and body connectivity. We slipped into sleep. I drifted into another realm after the night passed some hours, rolling back and forth with my mind less active. Hesitantly, I slept as a dream passed me, falling cloud of glass rain, coinciding with the thunder as I plummeted. Nothing hurt. The only sensation bothering me was the constant feeling of dropping. Reawakening early the next morning as I felt my vacation days were over. Now it was time to start planning what to do next. Betraying her idea of returning to the city, then returning to the farm. The bus route I felt encouraged us to follow along the path she desired stressed me some. Knowing the village was small and the place where time danced and left quickly after arriving. Spending time under the refuge of the strange old man and his farm for an indefinite period of time, I winced as I imagined myself taking over the farm with her after his death. Always uncomfortable around the old man on the farm and his house, differing greatly in comparison to the old man I met on the docks. I was considering questioning if I might leave for the desert big city. I heard rumors of the outskirts of the city being big traders of animal flesh. Plans changed that I no longer did want to visit the beach again. I began to plan in my head while exploring more of the town and finding him a gem. I found a bewildered conjuring state of ignorance from my surroundings while I wandered the outskirts of civilizations. Wanting to visit the other city and try to approach more contract work. Feeling risky since I acknowledged the lack of surefire success. I wanted to avoid having to menial work for a long time. I might get caught shoveling coal in a power plant or factory. At very worst, my girl nabbed or something terrible. Set to living a horrifying life somewhere doing terrible, meaningless labor. Easily I could also be captured and turned into a slave, but never be in sexual conquest of my body since I was a larger man. Although I could be raped if I acted out as a sign of power of my body from my owner. I might end up in a cell, in jail, or some unseen crime along with her. Or maybe I traverse my aimless life hungry, both of us aimless and hungry, completely isolated from large society somewhere abandoned in the city's shell of solitude between points of civilization, restless and on the streets. We talked some before going about our plan of returning to the woods, or what else we plan on doing next some days ago. Whenever I worried or focused on my thinking on having compelling forces of the realm or multiple realms began to contact me. As I walked, I was no longer hallucinated for some time. This was all I noticed, and I felt empty-headed and free. I remember before I left, I woke up noticing she had been fully satisfied from life. She needed not move a single appendage. Splayed out in display, my eyes washed over the woman. Respectfully, since she was not fully awake, only small amounts of consciousness drifting together form a person here and there as she rested, sleeping in. I considered her as a lucky charm for my life, and I functioned as her jewelry. A rhinestone pendant she wore around her neck at all times, protecting her from the choking forces of humanity. Never a choker necklace, I ran loose around her throat alongside as we traveled from the farm to here. My one and only cemented traveling partner I left before she regained her strength this morning. Defeated for now, the deed was done. After my visual triumph of her entire personhood relaxed and unflinching, sleeping alone and bed covers off, I wandered into this little the Shore Shack store. The tile red cash sink painted on a tugboat wood cutout, handmade by someone. Rather than belonging on the sidewalks, the store deserved a spot on the beach. Anywhere considered a tourist town in this world was standard, except by the small city since the buses still visited here, I was a tourist stop for some. For this reason, it still contained petite, silly stores and a single high-functioning convenience shop as well. I stopped in this morning to buy snacks. I chose as while I walked. Rare stop in shops, I required special setups to open. Talking to the owner this morning, they informed me of their multiple connections to city transports. Multiple working farms on the outskirts similar to the Rolling Hill farms of the Electric Crater. Being the city I visited, that still may remain nameless to my understanding. The other city had factories similar to the Center City factory of the Crater City with hookups to these helping to stock their store. My girlfriend talked some with the woman she had brunch on how they considerably set up well, both economically, logistically, as well as culturally, spiritually. They agreed to let her on the secret of commerce. It turns out they only went through one person. Her voice rang through my head from the past. I continue to remember the only other information about the big cities this port was connected to. The man who brought the goods for the convenience shop negotiated with many different parties around the desert big city, and occasionally these people negotiated, bringing goods into their wareyards and houses through other people's establishing super corporations. Contractors like me, they visit each other while the corporate negotiations. Quick chit-chats and billiards to better than little shacks the man they hired sent convenience store on its way to greatness. At least 25 people with companies they assisted were negotiated with and contracted in person to buy goods from. Some representing companies which transported their goods from specialized farms and factories far away, sold from their city-out warehouses. These thoughts compelled my mind towards the ideas of visiting the desert city. I bet I could see myself working for one of these warehouses, even if we failed to find more contracting work. Recalling the barn from the previous day, I remember thinking about my stomach and how it was looking better, healthier since for the past short time I spoiled myself with trout. Only recently, I now felt fuller. When I glanced at myself walking in the mirror before getting in bed, I noticed my body not yet showing any signs of body fat, but my overall shape seemed healthier. Although this may have been from body posture, which expressed better nutritional health than previously. While walking, I noticed myself ignoring my pain. A nomadic man, I was accumulated to a nomadic lifestyle. Lifestyle pain was just this, pain that one became accustomed to with the natural accumulation and onset of habitual lifestyle. The more someone lived a certain way, the increasing habitualizations of the downsides of the life became another portion of the day. For constant movement, the discomfort easily faded to the background chatter of the shifting body. I pulled open the sliding doors to the small shop gem to glare at the walls containing gorgeous knickknacks and light reflecting glowing items. The light in the shop, a goldenizing bronze yellow, casting everything in rich light. My behind popped a bit, mirroring a child or woman as I turned circles observing all the store offered. I especially enjoyed the sections of hats, trying on a knitted woolly blue hat with side flaps like dog ears. The shopkeeper had my abrasive attitude about having no desire to buy any, and decided to shout, "Mister, let me look at your scalp before trying anything else." No longer did I want to try any more hats. I replied to the man with a look and a head shake indicating denial as I took the gorgeous baby blue hat off, placing the hat back on the rack as he pouted his lips and harumphed back into his swivel chair. Noticing something behind this handsome man, no shopkeeper dared speaking with any flavor of frustration, thus obviously chipper looking. The first man sometime I could find bearing a fresh haircut. The previous time I noticed the equally spiffy haircut was a girl unleashed a pair of plier-sized shears upon my head. Working through God, giving me a narrated ear massage and clipping, creating the music to dance around the shape of my scalp, breaking me from a record through time. I was mesmerized by the noise her hands created with the instrument.
Behind the man was an old carnival game rested. Describing the game was easy. The only goal in playing was to speed up the horses faster than the others to the finish line where a buzz sounded, shooting the water into target centers to stir inner workings which compel the horses to move. Unsure how I knew this information since I never played or seen an object run. I noticed the buzzer in the vertical game board with dimless red light under a cage. The horses lined up along the start for competition, with linear path lines the pieces could take along the track. I noticed the checkerboard finish line on the opposite end where the horses lined up. Nearly instantaneously, I lined the pieces and put them together as a puzzle. It was a racing game, mimicking old race horses and their riders. I asked him if it would run. He informed me it no longer worked without plugging in and turning it on. We refused since we needed to fill the water canister, and this was excessive for 2 people. Someone gave it to me a long time ago, the young man indicated to me. I assumed a long time ago meant no less than 5 years ago. How long? He replied, they brought it to me on the back of a van from an old friend from Australia. Where's Australia? In the desert out west. Wait, isn't that the ocean? Well, that's the north. Maybe mixed up at this point, I decided more information about Australia, a potential new abode. Instead, I waited and practiced small talk about the paint on the game looking nice. Metal paint, specifically aluminum structures for the game board. The piece chipped in minuscule spots around the edges, and also the emblems which judged from the design. One of the horses was missing face paint. I made conversational sacrifice, commenting on having a nice metal helmet. The shopkeeper opened his mouth wide and slacked to the left and his eyes rolled back. Do you want to buy it? No. Without a thank you, instead I said, I really like it though. Feeling nothing but social prowess for my catch, clean up my etiquette from me speaking back. I noticed the layering of his haircut formulated a plan of social procedure for the conversation. First, I planned on talk business because that was the current topic trend, leading from this unsuccessful sale, after moving on to discussing the haircut. Afterwards, I would finally bring up the elusive desert city Australia.
My mind blanked as I stared up beside him. My little lips parted for a moment. My strings were caught and my head slumped and spoke. What is it like keeping this place afloat? He responded, without property tax it's easy. Small towns like this don't organize well enough to form a governmental society that needs any funding. It's more of a small city to me. Yeah, but it functions as a system that completely relies on itself. The people all worked in tandem. Most of us had weapons. If trouble happened, we would all work together to solve it, but never does. He was lying back in his chair, his arm folded over his chest, his hair in its layers folded over his head like a hat, cresting his skull. He continued, no, not much besides trade-ups. Got any decorated place around this town for you better? Know that my head had some influence in its interior designing. I was taken aback in his ability to speak. His words empty from his gums and the air moving in between his teeth. I moved my tongue in response. I doubt that. Replying in a sassy manner to add spark to the conversation, he howled in laughter. Before rebuttal, it would take too much time bringing in everyone from each place, messing with your busy schedule. He leaned up from his desk, pressing his anus to the floor before he hit the chair, with a side-eye squint in my heart, and said, what? We sat there for some moment or two before something to say, finally my brain. I'll give you half. Half of what? You replied uninterested. Half of all the shops and businesses at home probably have been helped upholstered by you, right? No, all of them. I stared in his hair, golden blonde layered correctly. Who cut your hair? He poked his pupils in the mind and spoke. I did. He said it was a scratchy bite. I needed to step twice before leaning back, being taken for balance by its venom. A real snake bite, spoken word spit. The liquid narcotic flowed into my brain like a toxic response. Nervous fired in a baby bark. Can you do mine? I tilted my chin up in the right question in sass. Yeah, if you like, I enjoy being creative and any outlet is a positive experience, so long as it stays easy going. The tone has changed. He dropped his facade, it was now melancholic and dreamy. His hands are ready to work. Long for him style drained at them and ready to begin. I promised I'd pay him, and he said however much works. He had begun by bringing me to the back living space where there was a room with no door, a toilet, and a drain in the floor. I sat backwards on the pottery material can as he fetched his shears from a cabinet. They were baby paper scissors. He approached me from behind and took my ear, long hair length, and began chopping. He snipped by picking up random strands at first and decided to cut the back closer to skin. He seemed to know by eyesight the dimensions he desired. Really, he needed to decide where to begin and work taking back length systematically. But with the equivalency to free-form sculptor, he attacked where he liked and as he pleased. Slowly it formed before his very eyes, quelling the vision and movements, a vibrant display only he'd seen. Finally, his presented Fanny called the devil from the shadows of the ground. His pretty half-human go-ahead popped from my friend's block light, with horns straight up. The heads floated from above the floor, similar to the ghost, but appeared more as a person cast in the dark. A shadow from the poplar trees seemed hidden. His mouth was gaped in lust. In subject and mood, he broke reality and asked, are you a man or a boy? My friend smiled and told me to turn back around so he could finish me off. He believed I was talking to him. The goat continued to ride and squawked at me. I could no longer see him, but the position of the noise and how I perceived it told me his head was no higher. In actuality, it may have been disembodied. I wouldn't know, I never saw the body. Eventually, I turned back around and he was still there, completely in the dark with a lit bathroom and creepy cement floors, walls, and ceiling. Like a shadow had eaten him. His body intact, his penis was mostly covered in fur, and his breasts were the only thing untouched by the pellet, and peaked, puckered, and pointed were his juicy nipples, peering into me, ready for a suckle. Catch this.